Ahoy, digital voyager. From what corner of Earth are you watching? A beach town, a mountain village, or a concrete jungle? Tell me in the comments. And if this video tickles your brain, share it like it's your grandma's best recipe. Here we go. I'm almost positive I was the first among our friends to hear whispers about Hidden Valley. It was mid-February, a brutal stretch for anyone buried in the world of tax accounting. The non-stop flood of deadlines, 12-hour office days, and endless spreadsheets had me running on fumes. Add to that the dreary, persistent drizzle that seems to suffocate the Pacific Northwest all winter, and life felt like one long gray smear. Gemma was just as overwhelmed in her own way. She ran the Portland location of a national furniture and home decor chain, which meant constant emails from her district manager pushing for higher credit card sign-ups, cutting labor costs, and hitting aggressive sales goals. The relentless demands were grinding her down, grinding us down. Weeks had passed without us doing anything remotely fun together, and the silence between us was starting to feel heavier than the rain outside. On top of everything, Gemma had put on some weight over the past year, not exactly shocking given her schedule. Her workouts at the gym became less frequent, then stopped altogether as late nights at work piled up. Anyone who's fallen out of a fitness routine knows how hard it is to claw your way back. It was during that bleak chapter that I first heard the phrase Hidden Valley Farm. The topic came up at lunch one afternoon. Theo Maddox, a coworker of mine, mentioned it offhandedly. "My sister and her husband went out there," Theo said, chewing as he spoke. "They're obsessed with the place. Keep raving about the clean air, the slower pace, the whole sense of community. Says it's nothing like the grind we're stuck in." He thumped a folder of tax returns onto the table. "Sounds like paradise. Isn't it somewhere near Grants Pass? That's Southern Oregon, right?" Nolan, another guy from our team, jumped in. Theo nodded. "I heard something about the founder," Nolan went on. "Some kind of microbiology prodigy?" "Yeah," Theo confirmed after swallowing. "Silas Brand's the guy. He's got some advanced biology degree. My sister says he built the place as an escape from city toxicity, physical and mental. Whole philosophy around it." He gestured toward the window. "Compare that to what we're doing." Outside, a homeless man pushed a shopping cart overflowing with belongings down the sidewalk. None of us said anything for a moment, the weight of the image hanging over us. Then Theo and Nolan excused themselves for a Zoom meeting and left. That's when I noticed the flyer Theo had left behind. It advertised an info session about Hidden Valley Farm scheduled for 5:30 that evening in a conference room nearby. I scanned the bullet points. The pitch was intriguing. Gemma wouldn't be home until late. Her store closed at 8 on Wednesdays, so I figured what harm could there be in checking it out? So I went. The speaker turned out to be a clean-cut guy about my age, early 30s, approachable, with a relaxed smile. He described life at Hidden Valley Farm in broad strokes, focusing on the contrast to city living rather than listing specifics. He talked about how urban chaos poisons relationships, drains your mental health, and chains you to work and bills. It was uncanny, like he'd been reading my thoughts aloud. My guard was up at first. I half expected some cultish setup designed to bleed people dry. But this seemed different. For one thing, you had to be accepted before joining. For another, you weren't donating. You were purchasing actual shares in the farm, legally yours and even resellable. And the speaker, Roman was his name, gave off zero creepy vibes. He felt like the sort of guy you'd end up chatting with over burgers at a block party. When the session wrapped up, Roman handed out brief questionnaires. "If you're curious for more details," he said, "fill one out and pass it to me before you leave. If it's not your thing, no big deal. No pressure." As he handed me the form, he gave a small nod, meeting my eyes. The sincerity of the gesture lingered with me. The questions were basic: marital status, kids, whether you owned or rented, job title, income range, and an email address. Seemed reasonable enough. I filled it out and slipped him my business card as I walked out. "Hope we talk again," Roman said, giving my shoulder a friendly pat. Driving home, I couldn't stop turning the idea over in my head. Was I losing it for even considering this? Or was this exactly what Gemma and I needed? Life had become one long grind, and something had to change before we snapped. The drive made me nostalgic, reminding me of when Gemma and I first crossed paths. Back then, I was a middle-distance runner at the University of Oregon. Solid, but not elite. Fourth in the 1,500 meters at the Pac-12 championships my junior year. Runner-up in the 4x400 relay my senior season. Respectable stats, though nowhere near professional. My athletic scholarship covered tuition, and I walked out with a bachelor's degree in accounting. Student athletes were housed in small apartment-style dorms, most with private bathrooms. The setup wasn't glamorous, but the community was close-knit. That's where I first met Gemma. At the time, she was dating Reggie Lake, a basketball player. Everyone knew Reggie, flashy, unpredictable, capable of dropping 30 points one night and barely scoring 4 the next. Never stopped him from taking the shot, though. Reggie had never been known for consistency on the court. What he lacked in reliability, though, he made up for with unrelenting bravado. He was always running his mouth, throwing shade during games, spinning wild stories afterward. That confidence of his could pull people in at first, but more often than not, it crossed the line into flat-out arrogance. I first met Gemma at a house party. I already knew she was dating Reggie, though he was nowhere in sight that night. She was exactly the type of woman I always found myself drawn to. I walked over and introduced myself. "Wyatt Weller," I said, and we shook hands, both of us smiling wider than courtesy really required. There was an instant spark, or at least I felt one. When she found out where I lived, she asked if I was into sports. I told her I ran track. At Oregon, track athletes didn't get the kind of spotlight the basketball or soccer players did, and honestly, I liked it that way. Our conversation flowed easily, unforced, until a loud commotion broke out across the room. That's when I realized Reggie had arrived. I noticed Gemma's expression change. Her smile faded slightly, and a hint of worry crossed her face as she glanced toward the noise. "I should probably go," she said. I held her gaze for a beat, shook her hand again, maybe holding on a moment longer than I should have, and said, "It was great meeting you, Gemma." She looked back at me just as Reggie strode into the room. Without even greeting her, he grabbed her hand. "Come on, we're leaving," he said sharply. I looked at her. She gazed up at him like he was untouchable, mesmerized. Then I looked at him, his eyes locked onto mine in open challenge, daring me to flinch. Neither of us did. He pulled her through the crowd with a smug grin, and she followed, still wearing that dazed, infatuated look. As they vanished into the party, I stood there puzzled. The Gemma I'd just spent 20 minutes talking with had struck me as self-assured, witty, and independent. But the woman walking out with Reggie looked timid, almost fragile. Even after that night, I couldn't shake the sense that, in some small way, we'd shared something real. Years went by. Maybe 2, maybe a little more. After we'd all graduated, I ran into Gemma again, this time in downtown Portland. I was out for drinks with coworkers. She was across the bar with her own friends. Even though our first encounter had been brief, I still remembered how much she'd impressed me, how her presence had stuck in my mind. I kept catching glimpses of her reflection in the mirror behind the bar, following her movements without meaning to. When I saw her heading toward the restroom, I took the opportunity, casually peeling away from my group so I could happen to meet her on the way. "Gemma?" I said, acting surprised. She looked up with a polite but puzzled smile, clearly trying to place me. "Wyatt Weller, University of Oregon," I reminded her. Recognition flickered across her face. "We met at a house party. You told me you wanted to be an interior decorator," I added, hoping the detail would jog her memory. Something clicked. Maybe it was my voice, maybe it was the fact I remembered, and suddenly her face lit up. She wrapped me in a warm hug. "Wyatt, of course. How are you? Are you living in Portland now?" she asked, words tumbling out fast. Conversation flowed easily from there. We ditched our groups and grabbed a small corner table, catching up like no time had passed. She told me she'd become an interior designer and was working for a high-end furniture store in the city. I shared that I was now a tax accountant at Eccles and Meyer. Reggie, she admitted, was long gone. He'd broken things off not long after that party years ago. By the end of the night, I walked her home. She didn't invite me inside, but she handed me her number and promised we'd get together the following weekend. We started dating soon after. The connection I'd felt years earlier only grew stronger. Gemma was witty, playful, and warm, nothing like the insecure girl I'd seen trailing Reggie through that crowded party. At the time, I was sharing my house with my cousin, Shasta, or more accurately, she was renting space from me. She was a couple of years older, my aunt's daughter, and her life had been rougher than mine. She'd dropped out of high school before eventually getting her GED, and she hung around with people I wasn't always comfortable having in my home. One night, I came home late and saw a motorcycle parked in the driveway. Immediately, I knew she had company. When I walked inside, there he was, a big guy in a black leather jacket, long black beard, familiar face. "Hey, Wyatt, you remember Zeke, right?" Shasta called from the couch. I gave him a nod. "Zeke." And then I caught the smell. "Shasta," I said evenly, "I told you not to smoke in the house." I didn't like laying down rules, but it was my place, and that one wasn't negotiable. "Relax, man," Zeke said, already heading toward the window. "I'll crack it open, turn on the fan, no big deal." He lifted both hands, palms facing the ceiling, a faint grin tugging at his mouth. It wasn't friendly, it felt almost taunting. Here he was, in my house, telling me to calm down. Not a chance. "Listen up, Zeke." I whipped around to face him, my voice sharp and unyielding. "Wherever you live, you do what you want. Smoke, sprawl on the couch, whatever. But this is my home. I pay the mortgage. I cover the utilities, the taxes, the insurance. That means my rules apply here," I pressed on, unwavering. "I don't ask much, but the few rules I do have aren't negotiable. If you can't live with that, the door's open. Got it?" He didn't respond at first, just stared, his eyes narrowing. The smirk faded. His body, once loose and pleading, stiffened. Finally, he gave me a short nod, an acknowledgement stripped of defiance. "Sorry, Wyatt," Shasta murmured, voice low. I glanced at her briefly, then turned and walked off toward the other end of the house, letting the tension seep out as I moved away. This place had been mine since I'd bought it from my parents. It used to be a rental, a little run down, though I'd been fixing it up. Out back stood a detached garage I'd been converting into an accessory dwelling unit, almost finished now, except for the bathroom. Honestly, without Shasta's rent, keeping this place afloat would have been impossible. The weekend after, Gemma and I slipped away to Astoria, up on the far northwestern tip of the state. The town brimmed with history, old buildings, museums, statues on every corner. We didn't see any of it. We weren't there for sightseeing. We were there for each other, and that was all we needed. The only stray thought that clouded me during that trip was a brief memory of Reggie Lake, some old college connection that never should have lingered as long as it had. How could I have ever compared Reggie to Gemma? The thought itself felt ridiculous now. I chalked it up to leftover immaturity from those days and let it go. As the months rolled forward, Gemma and I only drew closer. The ghost of Reggie faded completely, irrelevant. By year's end, I knew. I wanted to marry her. We'd already talked about it, and I could tell she felt the same. That year, everything shifted fast. Gemma got accepted into a management training program with Laguna and 101, a high-end home furnishings company known for its glossy catalogs and absurdly expensive decor. Around that same time, I finally finished the garage apartment, and Shasta moved out there. For the first time, the main house belonged fully to Gemma and me. With Shasta settled in the ADU, Gemma started spending nearly every night at my place, and Zeke, the guy I'd never fully trusted, actually started to prove me wrong. He seemed genuinely serious about Shasta, unlike her previous boyfriends. Plus, he was handy and occasionally pitched in on repairs around the property. I couldn't deny it. I appreciated that. Eventually, I proposed. She said yes. We got married and spent our honeymoon in Hawaii, staying at the Sheraton on Poipu Beach in Kauai. It felt unreal, just the two of us, the ocean, the horizon, and the promise of everything ahead. On the flight home, I kept thinking, life couldn't get any better. We had each other, we had steady work, we had a house, no small feat in Portland's brutal housing market. Everything about the future felt wide open, bright, untouchable. I couldn't picture anything ever shaking that. Back to now. The night after the Hidden Valley Farm presentation, I came home to an empty house. Gemma still hadn't returned. Outside, near the garage, I spotted several motorcycles parked in a loose cluster. Probably Zeke's crew. I didn't love the sight. The last thing I wanted was my property turning into some biker hangout. But technically, they weren't breaking any rules. I fixed myself dinner, mind half elsewhere, turning over how I was going to tell Gemma about the Hidden Valley deal. The more I thought about it, the more it felt like a huge opportunity. Or was I just imagining that? Gemma walked in a little after 8. "How was work?" I asked. "Sales tanked," she said flatly. "The district manager tore into me. Mary Louise, the one assistant I actually trust, quit today." Her voice tightened. "And I'm being forced to take a 10% pay cut." I could feel the weight in every word. One wrong response and the frustration she carried might land squarely on me. I kept it light, quiet, a nod, silent support. As she vented more about the pressure and expectations, I tried to shift the mood, ease the tension. "Want a beer?" I offered carefully. Her head snapped up. "What?" "Oh no. Wrong move. I hadn't even seen that one coming. I'm pouring my heart out about how bad work is," she said, voice sharp. "And your response is to ask if I want a beer?" "Are you even listening to me?" I asked, my voice low. Even now I can't pinpoint exactly what I'd done wrong, but after years of marriage I'd learned one survival tactic. Keep quiet. Short answers. No arguments. Do anything to keep the peace. And yet, beneath that silence, a thought always pulsed. I deserve more than this endless tension. Life shouldn't have to feel like this. "I don't deserve this," Gemma whispered back, frustration breaking in her voice. I looked over at her, her lips pressed tight, and gave a slow nod, pretending I fully understood. Maybe it was weak of me, but I didn't have the strength left to fight. Later, lying in the dark, I thought about the Gemma I'd fallen in love with, the carefree girl whose laugh came easy. Back then, everything between us felt light. My mind wandered further, to the life I had once pictured, the career I thought I'd build, the freedom we both used to dream about. The truth was brutal. We weren't just missing those dreams, we weren't even moving toward them. That night, before sleep finally claimed me, I thought of Roman from Hidden Valley Farm. His talk about their way of living, simple, grounded, somehow richer than ours, echoed in my head like a promise I couldn't shake. In the days after, I said nothing. I kept Hidden Valley Farm to myself, though it stayed lodged in my mind. Work at Eccles and Meyer only made it worse. Tax season was closing in, April 15th looming like a storm cloud. Every day the weight of it pressed heavier on me. Fridays were usually our one escape. Gemma often had the day off, and we'd try to make the evening feel special. That Friday, she cooked her signature shrimp pasta and set the dining table. A bottle of wine waited, already opened. From the level in the glass, she'd started drinking before I got home. For the first time in weeks, the mood was lighter. We lingered at the table after dinner, comfortable in the quiet. Then Gemma looked up through her lashes, a sly smile playing on her lips. Mischief sparkled in her eyes, like she knew a secret I didn't. "What?" I asked, half laughing. "Why didn't you say anything?" she teased, grin widening. "Say what?" I asked, honestly confused. "This," she said, sliding something across the table, a glossy brochure. Even before I touched it, I knew what it was, Hidden Valley Farm. I flipped through it slowly. The photos were even more striking than what I'd seen in Roman's presentation. Rolling fields, pristine cottages, families laughing around long farm tables. The design screamed professional yet inviting marketing. At the back, an offer, an invitation to spend a weekend on the farm, staying in one of their guest cottages. I admitted I'd gone to a meeting about HVF weeks earlier, but hadn't found the courage to mention it. Truthfully, I'd been afraid she'd think I was crazy for even considering it. She said the brochure had shown up in the mail that afternoon, and to my surprise, she was curious. That night became one of the rawest, most honest conversations we'd had in years. We talked about our jobs, our routines, and how far we'd drifted from the life we thought we'd wanted. I confessed how miserable work had become. She admitted she hated her job even more. By the end of it, we agreed. We'd go. We'd take the weekend trip to Hidden Valley Farm. Just speaking the decision out loud felt like setting down a weight we'd carried for far too long. That night, for the first time in what felt like forever, we were close again. Really close. The strain between us softened into something tender, almost like those early days when everything felt new. The drive to Hidden Valley Farm took 4 hours. When we finally pulled in, the place looked less like a farm and more like a secluded boutique resort. At check-in, we were handed a key, a map, and a handwritten note inviting us to a reception later that evening. It was signed by Silas Brand, the farm's manager. Our cottage blew away every expectation. The living room felt bright and airy, with a plush couch, a couple of armchairs, and a small wooden dining table. Sunlight streamed through big windows. Soft pastels and polished hardwood floors gave the space a welcoming warmth. The kitchenette was modest but complete, a tiny fridge, counter space, utensils. The bedroom was snug yet inviting, with a queen bed and 2 surprisingly roomy closets. The bathroom felt like a private spa, stone tile, a soaking tub, a separate shower, and, best of all, a door leading to an outdoor shower. Quietly, I hoped the weather would stay warm enough for us to use it together. The evening reception felt more like a casual cocktail party than anything formal. At the door, we got name tags, and a photographer snapped our picture as someone offered us our choice of drink. A woman named Summer greeted us, striking, effortlessly earthy, and led us inside, introducing us to other guests and longtime residents. A generous buffet waited, almost all of it sourced from the farm itself. "Everything you're eating is grown right here," Summer said proudly. "Give it a few days, and you won't believe how good you'll feel eating this fresh, toxin-free." She wasn't exaggerating. The flavors were so vivid, it felt like tasting food for the first time. Later, under a clear sky, Gemma and I walked back to our cottage along a stone path. The night air smelled of wildflowers. We stayed quiet, soaking it in. "Well?" I asked eventually. "What do you think?" Gemma smiled softly. "It almost feels unreal," she said. "The people, the food, this place. It's like stepping into a dream. I feel I've truly earned the right to live this way," she murmured, her voice steady but low. The remark stayed with me, echoing in my head as I considered it. Eventually, I said, "I didn't know what I was walking into here, but what surprised me most is how normal everyone is." My eyes swept over the faces around us. They seemed like the kind of friends we might have met anywhere. Honestly, I expected free-spirited hippies, but they're just people. Not so different from us. I said it to Gemma, and she gave a quiet nod, her fingers slipping into mine as we strolled toward the cottage. Though the day had stretched into dusk and fatigue weighed on both of us, there was still a hum of excitement in the air. Gemma announced she wanted to freshen up, disappearing into the bathroom, while I lingered in the living space, absorbing every detail of the small home. The following morning, Saturday, we joined the others for a simple breakfast in the communal hall. Bowls of fresh fruit, tangy yogurt, light but satisfying fare. As we ate, a tall man with an easy smile moved through the room, greeting each person with warm handshakes and friendly words. There was something immediately disarming about him, an effortless calm that made you relax without even realizing it. Eventually, he reached our table. "Tom Jennings," he said warmly, extending his hand. How's everything feeling to you so far? We admitted honestly that we were impressed and surprisingly at peace since arriving at Hidden Valley Farm. His expression lit up at that. That's wonderful, he said. Gemma, you work in retail, right? And Wyatt, you're a financial controller? The fact that he already knew those details threw me off. He held our gaze with a kind of sincerity that felt almost unnerving. We could really use both of you here. Silas has a vision for how life can be, and we're building toward that together. Your skills could make a real difference. When he walked away, I felt an odd surge of optimism radiating from the room. And when someone like Tom, bright, charismatic, impossible not to like, told you that you were needed, you couldn't help but feel flattered. I glanced at Gemma. The look we exchanged said everything without a word. Pure, quiet positivity. Later that day, we were split into smaller groups for tours. Each couple was paired with a guide. Ours was Finn, a guy around my age, laid back and approachable. He led us across the vast property, fields stretching to the horizon, barns and processing buildings, even a section devoted entirely to cultivating marijuana, perfectly legal in Oregon. Finn gestured toward a large metal structure. That's where we do some electronics assembly, he explained, then added with a sheepish grin, Don't ask me the specifics. Silas is the tech guy. He set it up a couple years back, but it makes money, and that helps keep everything here running. We also toured a wellness center on the property, gym equipment, locker rooms, hot tubs, even a spa-like vibe. Down by the river, they'd hauled in pale sand to create their own private beach. The whole place felt oddly luxurious, a blend of rustic farm and boutique resort. As we wrapped up, Finn said casually, Be in the dining hall by 7 tonight, trust me, you'll want to see this. That evening, the dining room buzzed with soft chatter. At our table sat a couple who had relocated to Hidden Valley Farm about a year earlier. They spoke with quiet conviction about leaving their old lives in Seattle, their jobs, their routines, for this new way of living. They weren't dreamers or drifters, just ordinary professionals, our age, who had chosen to start over. In them, we caught a glimpse of ourselves. When dinner ended, the lights dimmed, and the room fell silent. A platform at the far end, a makeshift stage, was suddenly washed in a single spotlight. Tom Jennings stepped into it, smiling broadly, microphone in hand. Everyone, he began, his voice both calm and commanding. Welcome to Hidden Valley Farm. To our new friends, especially you, welcome. By now, you've started to see what this place is about. This isn't just somewhere to live. It's an opportunity to change your life. He let the words settle before continuing. We have a vision for the future. Tonight, you'll hear more about it. He gestured toward the side of the stage. Please help me welcome someone who needs no introduction to those already here. Silas Brand. A man in his mid-40s stepped into the light, lean build, jeans, a plain t-shirt, graying curls, and a beard a few days past trimmed. As Silas took the microphone, I caught sight of a broad, imposing figure lingering behind the stage, observing in silence. When I first bought this land, Silas began, all I wanted was to slow down, to cut away the stress, to eat clean food, breathe clean air, and escape the constant noise of city life. He swept a hand toward the crowd. This, what you see here, is what I dreamed of. He paused, letting his eyes travel across the faces before him. But then friends reached out. They wanted the same thing. So, we built a plan. We became self-sufficient, growing our food, taking care of our own needs. People outside wanted high-quality food, so we built a business to provide it. And as time went on, other ventures grew from that. We invited people with valuable skills, people like you, and together we've made this stronger. It isn't just my farm anymore. It's ours. Silas's tone softened, though it carried to every corner of the hall. We share a vision for what this place can become. It won't be right for everyone. But I'll ask you this. What do you really want from your life? He stepped back slightly, silence folding over the room. There will be time tomorrow for questions in your meetings. Tonight, I ask only one thing. Step outside afterward. Listen to the river. Breathe the night air. Look at the stars. And ask yourself, is the life you have enough? Or are you ready for something more? Good night. Gemma and I sat frozen, stunned yet exhilarated by what we'd just heard. There was something about this man that felt larger than life, something more than charm, more than mere confidence. He projected raw focus, an almost palpable determination, and a sense of purpose so strong it seemed unshakable. In that moment, I knew I would follow him anywhere. From the corner of my vision, I caught Gemma watching him too, her face hovering between admiration and another emotion I couldn't name. I had seen that same expression on her before, though I couldn't remember when or what had caused it. "Quite a presence, isn't he?" murmured Mike, the guy from Seattle, standing at my side. I could only nod, unable to articulate the strange pull I felt. After a pause, once we'd drifted away from Mike and his wife, I leaned in and whispered, "Who's the big guy on stage?" Mike raised an eyebrow, almost surprised at the question. "Him? That's Silas's security, Ed Gunther," he said. The way he spoke the name carried a hint of unease, as if there was more to the story than he cared to explain. The next morning, we were scheduled for a 9:30 appointment. At check-in, someone handed us a brochure summarizing what to expect, a neat set of bullet points and promises about the path ahead. The meeting itself felt efficient but warm, professional, yet friendly enough to put us at ease. Our guide introduced herself as Angela. She came across as approachable, competent, and genuinely enthusiastic. Together, we went over the central question. Were we ready to commit to a complete lifestyle change and join Hidden Valley Farm, HVF? The model was straightforward. Members purchased equity in the farm, and their living arrangements were determined by how much stock they owned. The financial packet they gave us was dense but seemed legitimate at first glance. It spelled out that stockholders could resell their shares if they chose to leave, and that housing ranged from shared dormitories to private cabins, depending on investment level. After reviewing our own savings, Gemma and I realized we qualified for a modest cottage, almost identical to the cozy unit we were staying in for the weekend. "Can we see the exact cottage we'd be assigned?" Gemma asked suddenly. "Absolutely," Angela said, fingers tapping across her laptop. "You're in 19B this weekend. Updated bath, solid condition, one of the nicer ones actually." Her brow furrowed as she scanned the screen. "Hold on." Without another word, she left the room. The silence that followed was awkward. Neither of us knew what to say. After a few minutes, Angela returned, grinning. "Good news," she said brightly. 19B usually falls into a higher equity bracket, but the previous tenants just upgraded. If you want it, I can lock it in now, but you'll need to decide immediately. Before I even processed what she'd said, Gemma answered for both of us. "We'll take it." And with that, our leap into life at HVF was official. What surprised me wasn't the decision itself, but how thrilled Gemma seemed to make it. The weeks that followed were consumed by unwinding our old lives, jobs, routines, obligations, all the loose threads we had to tie off. The biggest complication for me was my house. Many members sold their homes to buy larger stakes in the farm, but I chose another route. Shasta and Zeke planned to move into the main house, while I decided to rent out the garage apartment and let the income cover my mortgage. We brought very little with us besides clothing. Most furniture stayed behind. 3 weeks later, after the last box was packed and the final arrangements made, we returned to HVF to stay for good. In that time, Gemma and I had dissected every aspect of what our new life would look like. One thing quickly became clear. Some parts of the farm ran like clockwork, while others were still works in progress. Half-finished projects scattered about like pieces of a grand vision not yet realized. I brushed it off. Growing pains, I told myself. Over time, we pieced together how HVF actually operated. It functioned as a cooperative venture. Members pooled profits annually, each receiving a share based on their equity. Small monthly advances were available, deducted from the final payout at year's end. On the first Monday after our permanent arrival, Gemma and I were called in to meet the commercial committee. Their job was to assign roles to new members. Gemma landed at the Farmer's Kiosk, a roadside retail shop leading toward Grants Pass, reporting to a man named Tom Jennings. I, meanwhile, was placed in the business office, handling bookkeeping duties for the farm's central entity, HVFLLC. My supervisor was a woman named April Mann. I'd seen her in passing but had never spoken to her. April struck me as efficient and pragmatic, not unkind, just someone who valued getting to the point. While Gemma spent her days at the kiosk, I worked out of the office complex known as the Quadrant, where Silas and the inner leadership circle lived. To my surprise, Claire, Mike's wife from Seattle, also worked there. She was friendly, generous with advice, and quick to help me find my footing. The work itself wasn't complicated, standard bookkeeping, but the systems behind it were messy and outdated. After a few weeks, I began spotting inefficiencies everywhere, ways to simplify tasks and eliminate wasted effort. One afternoon, I brought my ideas to April. "What exactly are you suggesting?" she asked, her expression sharpening with cautious curiosity. She confronted me, not once, but twice, and the look in her eyes carried a sharp, unspoken accusation that caught me completely off guard. I had walked into the exchange, assuming she might welcome my input, maybe even value that I was trying to smooth out inefficiencies. Instead, her expression suggested I had trespassed across a boundary I didn't even know existed. I started to lay out my thoughts about how the system could run better, but she didn't let me finish. "Write it down," she said flatly, cutting me off. "I'll look at it when I have time. Until then, stay focused on Claire." Her tone, clipped and public, landed hard, especially with the entire office able to hear every word. Humiliation simmered into frustration. Why was April treating me like this? I wasn't undermining her. I was only trying to help. Strangely, that tension never bled into my life outside work. Beyond the farm's gates, everything with Gemma was almost idyllic. Life at Hidden Valley Farm felt like a separate reality altogether. Quieter, healthier, slower in the best way. Gemma loved her role, adored her colleagues, and that joy radiated through our days together. The relentless strain from our old lives had evaporated. Meals here were fresh, unprocessed, bursting with flavor. We spent nearly every spare moment outdoors, walking through meadows, climbing hills, exploring hidden trails. Gemma's weight began to drop, her skin glowed with color, and she seemed lighter, freer than I'd ever seen her. On our first weekend, we stumbled upon a riverside ritual the locals treated as routine, though to us it felt eerie, almost otherworldly. Our entire existence felt transformed. I traced it to a few things: the immediate relief of escaping our previous stress, the sheer amount of physical activity, and the clean, nourishing food. I felt it in myself, too. I was stronger, clearer-headed. Gemma's change was even more striking. In those first months, every lingering doubt about uprooting our lives vanished. We laughed more. We fought less. We were thriving. But slowly, imperceptibly, things began to shift. I'd mentioned before that I wanted to overhaul the farm's accounting practices. Hidden Valley Farm, LLC desperately needed it. April, though, had no interest in hearing me out. If I'm being honest, I was never more than decent at bookkeeping. My strength lay in organization, finding waste, improving processes, making software serve the people using it rather than burdening them. Still, something about HVF's finances didn't sit right. I couldn't yet say what, but the books were off. April seemed intent on keeping certain records out of my reach, forcing me to proceed carefully, almost cautiously. Then one afternoon, while combing through transactions, I spotted an entry that didn't exist anywhere on the balance sheet. It appeared to be revenue, but the figures didn't connect to any formal report. Curious, I turned to Claire, the quiet, dark-haired woman at the desk beside mine. "Hey, what's this account for?" I asked casually. Her reaction was instant and unnerving, shoulders tightening, eyes flicking toward April's open office door before darting back to me. She gave the slightest shake of her head. "What?" I asked again, confused. "Don't," she whispered. "Just drop it." Before I could push further, a sharp sound echoed from April's office. Claire stiffened. I retreated to my workstation, pretending to focus on spreadsheets, though my thoughts were spinning. A moment later, I felt April's presence. She was leaning in her doorway, arms crossed, silently watching me. Later that day, Claire slipped a folder onto my desk without a word. Inside was a single sticky note. "Be careful. Cameras everywhere. Destroy this note." I stared at it, unsure if the warning referred to April or someone else entirely. The next folder I examined rattled me even more. It held letters from the IRS, requests for clarification about HVF's tax filings. The agency wanted details on quarterly payments. Some responses had been sent, others conspicuously absent. One name kept appearing: Damon Claiborne, the IRS agent on the case. His letters made it clear he wasn't going away. So far, HVF had managed to keep deeper scrutiny at bay, but it felt like only a matter of time before Claiborne dug further. I tried to put it out of my mind, but couldn't. A few days later, chaos struck. From the central courtyard near the executive housing, shouting erupted, angry, urgent. Someone's voice rose to a near scream. I stood, craning my neck toward the window, but couldn't see the source. The shouting intensified, then twisted into a single chilling wail, almost siren-like. A man burst into view, sprinting downhill from the courtyard. Seconds later, an SUV tore after him, engine roaring. Behind the wheel was Ed Gunther, the farm's massive head of security, with several men packed in beside him. I didn't see what happened next, but I heard pieces of it. "Stop! No!" followed by the unmistakable sounds of a struggle. "Back to work!" April's voice sliced through the office, sharp and commanding. She stood in the doorway, hands planted on her hips, exuding authority. In that moment, I felt like a school kid caught misbehaving. That night, I told Gemma everything. She mentioned seeing Gunther's black Suburban heading toward Grants Pass, followed closely by another HVF vehicle. Over dinner, we shared what we knew with Mike and Claire, our closest friends at the farm, speaking in hushed tones. Halfway through the meal, Tom Jennings stepped onto the small stage at the open-air dining hall. "Everyone, everyone," he called, his voice carrying easily over the room. "Once dinner concludes, please remain seated. Silas has an announcement." Silas addressing the group wasn't unheard of, but the formality of Jennings's introduction gave the moment an unusual weight. When Silas finally stepped forward, something in his demeanor had changed, and I couldn't ignore it. Bare feet planted firmly on the floor, sleeves rolled up past his elbows, a sun-bleached work shirt clinging to him, and khaki trousers frayed from years of wear. He looked unassuming, almost casual, yet there was no mistaking the authority that radiated from him. Charisma clung to Silas like a second skin, effortless and unshakable. One glance at the faces around me was enough. They were transfixed, drawn to him as if under a spell. Gemma's face mirrored theirs. I recognized that look instantly. I'd seen it in people who had surrendered to fascination. "Something happened on the farm today," Silas began, his tone measured but heavy. He let the silence linger as he walked slowly across the stage, gaze lowered, hands sunk deep in his pockets, carrying the weight of his words like a burden. "One of our brothers felt dissatisfied," he said at last, and he acted on that dissatisfaction. His arms swept outward, the gesture pulling every person in the room into his orbit. "This place works because we rely on one another. Our balance depends on it, but all it takes is one person's unrest to rattle that balance." My eyes followed his every step. It was impossible to look away. Silas didn't have to shout. His presence alone commanded the room. At the edge of the stage stood Ed Gunther, hands clasped tight, gaze fixed on Silas. Opposite him lingered a striking blonde woman, poised and still, maybe in her 30s. I knew her face but couldn't place her name. "What we're building here," Silas said, his arms spreading even wider now, "is growth. And with growth," he added, voice softening, "comes inevitable pain. Our mission is simple: create health, nurture life, for everyone here. That's the compass guiding me, guiding us. But every now and then, someone's personal wants clash with that purpose, and that's always a heartbreak." He let the words settle before speaking again. "When that happens, adjustments must be made. I ask this of you: be willing to give a little, for all of us. And in return, I give you my word. If something troubles you, we will do everything in our power to set it right." "My door is always open," Silas finished. "If I'm away, Tom, Ed, or April will listen. We know where we're headed. We move forward with intention. Good night." With that, he stepped down from the stage. The audience began to stir, chairs scraping as people drifted toward the exits. I turned to Mike. "What was that about?" I asked, hoping for insight. He gave me nothing, just a shake of his head and a quick stride toward the door. I had to hurry to keep up. Even when I caught him, he refused to answer my questions. Finally, I switched topics, asking about the blonde woman near the stage. Mike leaned closer and muttered, "His wife," before veering off with Claire toward their cottage. His wife? I thought. What kind of wife? The unease that had colored the day only deepened. The tension hadn't started there. It had begun earlier with the confrontation in the quad. Now Silas's cryptic speech had layered more questions onto an already strange day. Gemma and I discussed it briefly, but she brushed it off, unbothered. By Tuesday, I was back at work. Gemma would spend the day at the beach with the other women, which usually meant our evenings would be good. I looked forward to it. Yet a different problem gnawed at me. The C account. Missing money. Huge sums that no one could explain. Every trail led back to that file, and Claire knew something about it, something she refused to share. The silence around it was unsettling. Then, another notice arrived from Damon Claiborne at the IRS. I couldn't even track down where our previous response had gone. The tension built like a storm cloud. That night, Gemma returned from the beach in an oddly buoyant mood. Quiet at dinner, though, thoughtful, as if her mind had drifted elsewhere. Afterward, I asked about her day. "Yes," she said simply, smiling faintly. "It was good. I really enjoy the farm store. I gave them some marketing ideas, and Tom and the others seemed to like them." Pride flickered in her voice. "That's great, Gemma," I said, meaning it. "I'm glad you're settling in, but what about the beach?" She hesitated, glancing toward the river. "Different," she murmured. "Different how?" I asked, curious, expecting a light-hearted story. "Silas came by," she said. "What?" The word flew out sharper than I meant. "What do you mean?" "At first it was normal," she explained. "We were sunbathing, swimming, relaxing. I was lying on my towel, half dozing, when I heard footsteps. Someone approaching who didn't belong. I opened my eyes and saw him, fully dressed, walking the shoreline." She paused, remembering. It took a second to realize it was him. I thought about covering up, but I didn't. There was no one else around. "Did you talk to him?" I asked quickly. "He came over," she said, crouched down next to me like we were already familiar. He knew my name, asked how I liked it here, said he'd heard good things about me. It was flattering and strange. Strange indeed, and it wasn't the only thing gnawing at me. While reviewing income statements earlier that week, I'd spotted discrepancies, thousands of dollars unaccounted for, all pointing toward the mysterious C account. With tax season closing in, every dollar had to be accounted for. Suddenly, I understood why Claiborne from the IRS was circling like a hawk. When I mentioned the issue to Claire, she didn't hesitate for even a second. She told me plainly that I had to bring it up with April directly. So I made my way down the corridor to April's office and stopped just outside her door. She was leaning forward over her laptop, eyes fixed on the screen, fingers flying across the keyboard. From where I stood, I could clearly see the C account open in front of her. I watched every movement carefully, memorizing the sequence she used to sign in. I even caught a glimpse of the program she was using to manage the files. She hadn't noticed me at all, completely oblivious to the quiet way I was observing her. If I'd been able to figure out her password, I realized I could have accessed and copied those same files myself. "April?" I finally spoke up. She jumped so hard, she nearly toppled from her chair, spinning around and slamming the tiny top right drawer of her desk closed. "God!" she gasped, hand pressed to her chest. "Do you always sneak up on people like that? You scared the hell out of me." Her voice sharpened instantly. "What do you want?" "I just needed to ask about the C account and the quarterly taxes connected to it," I said carefully, keeping my tone measured. April stared at me for several long seconds, expression impossible to read. Then, in an unnervingly calm voice, she said, "I'll take care of it. Don't worry about that. Just stay out of it." "But," I started, "that account's getting a lot of income from the farm store. We need to report it, pay the—" "I said leave it alone!" she shouted, cutting me off, her voice echoing against the walls. "I'll handle everything! Go back to work!" Humiliated and seething, I turned away and headed out. Claire had seen the whole exchange. As I passed her desk, she shot me a questioning look. I ignored it, though my anger burned hot. I was furious with April, and more suspicious of her than ever. Something about the entire situation stank. That night, I tried talking it through with Gemma, hoping she might help me make sense of what I was seeing. But she hardly reacted. She seemed distant, almost detached, as if she wanted the conversation to end before it even started. When I pressed her, she brushed me off with a flat, "Everything's fine." That strange distance hung over us for days. Then, about a week later, she came home buzzing with energy. "Guess where we're having dinner tonight?" she announced, grinning. "In the dining room?" I teased, confused by her excitement. "Wrong," she laughed. "We're going to Silas's house, just us and a few others." I blinked. "Wait, how did that happen?" She explained that Silas and Tom Jennings had stopped by the farm store earlier that day. Tom mentioned Silas wanted to check out the new updates, most of which were Gemma's ideas. Silas had been impressed, not just by the improvements, but by Gemma herself, and he'd invited us to a small dinner party at his home. "We need to be there by 6:30, she said, already mapping out her evening. "I have to shower, fix my hair, and find something decent to wear." I joked about joining her in the shower, but she waved me off with a grin. "No time for that. This is important." When my turn to shower came, I rushed. By the time I was dressed, Gemma was already ready, wearing a sleek dress with a daring neckline and an open back that made a bra impossible. She looked stunning and elegant at once. I felt a surge of pride just looking at her. She was radiant. Dinner at Silas's place was as polished as I'd expected. A dozen or so guests moved around the table, April among them, a presence I deliberately ignored. Silas was magnetic as ever. He greeted us warmly and struck up an easy conversation with me. "I've heard about the great work you've been doing," he said. "How are you and your wife liking life on the farm?" I admitted how refreshing the change had been, how it had improved our moods and our routines. Silas nodded with apparent interest, though I couldn't shake an uneasy feeling about him. There was something behind the charm I couldn't quite name. When we sat for dinner, I found myself next to Ed Gunther, while Gemma ended up beside Silas. The food was excellent, the conversation lively. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Gemma and Silas locked in a surprisingly animated exchange, their focus entirely on each other. Later, walking back to the cottage, I tried to recap the night with Gemma, the way we always did after social gatherings, but she seemed distracted, far away. When I asked about her talk with Silas, she dismissed it with clipped answers. In the days that followed, her distant mood didn't lift. Even though we were technically still engaged, the spark we'd found again at Hidden Valley Farm felt like it was fading. At work, I kept to myself, but couldn't stop keeping tabs on April. I saw her access the C account often, always going to that same drawer where I knew she kept her passwords. Once, she even caught me watching her and responded with a slow, exaggerated smirk that felt almost mocking. One thing was certain, she was hiding something. A few days later, Gemma came home glowing again. "Tom stopped by today," she said breathlessly. "There's a dinner meeting tonight. Me, Tom, some of the staff, and Silas. They're talking about a huge retail expansion, and they want my opinion." "That's amazing," I told her honestly. "Do you know how long it's supposed to run?" I asked her a simple question. "I don't know, Wyatt," she replied, her tone sharp with frustration. "I guess it depends on how much time we've got." She showered, slipped into a flattering dress, redid her makeup, and left the house looking composed and elegant, ready to meet me at Silas's place. But the whole situation had started to feel strange. We'd been here for months with barely any interaction with Silas. Then suddenly, the moment he seemed to notice her, she was invited over twice in just 1 week. After the dinner at his place, I found myself needing fresh air to clear my head, so I wandered down the farm's dirt paths, thinking about how everything here actually operated. There were obvious advantages: clean food, low stress, and stunning scenery. But there were cracks, too. We were basically working for free, volunteering, with vague promises of sharing profits. Meanwhile, HVF LLC was clearly making serious money. Where was that money going? Something didn't add up. I needed to dig into my C folder and figure out what was really happening. As I followed the ridge trail, I caught sight of the truck Tom Jennings usually drove heading toward Grants Pass. Maybe the meeting had ended and Gemma was already on her way back. I turned toward the cottage. By the time I got there, it was almost 8 o'clock. The sky was still pale, but shadows were spreading fast. I called out for her, checked the rooms, and realized she still wasn't home. I wasn't completely sure it had been Tom behind the wheel, but the truck was definitely his. I sat down with a book, trying to distract myself, and nearly 2 hours crawled by before Gemma finally walked through the door. During that time, my mind spun in endless loops. Jealousy, pride at how gracefully she seemed to handle everything, and an uneasy suspicion that something about this place, especially the finances, wasn't right. When she came in, I forced myself to sound calm and asked how her meeting had gone. "It was fine," she said. "That was it. No details." She met my eyes briefly, then turned away. Something about it didn't sit right. Later, after she showered and slipped into bed, I pushed her for specifics. Who had been there, how long it lasted, what they'd talked about. "Wyatt, I'm exhausted," she murmured. "It's been a long day. Can we go over this tomorrow?" She tried shutting me down. When I didn't let it go, she accused me of not trusting her, and the argument escalated fast. For the first time since we'd arrived at Hidden Valley Farm, we went to sleep angry. The next day during lunch, I went for a walk and crossed paths with Mike and Claire on one of the trails. Over time, I'd learned that private conversations needed to happen away from everyone else's ears. I approached them, and they picked up on my mood right away. Mike studied my face and asked quietly, "Everything okay, Wyatt?" I needed to get it off my chest, so I told them everything. Silas's sudden interest in Gemma, the dinner invitation, the follow-up meeting I wasn't included in, and Gemma's odd, almost secretive behavior afterward. "Is it just me?" I asked. I desperately needed another point of view. I half expected them to reassure me, to say I was imagining things. At least that's what I was hoping for. But as I watched their faces, the silence said otherwise. Claire shot a glance at Mike. Mike avoided my eyes. They knew something. "What is it?" I demanded, searching their faces. Claire gave Mike a small nod. Mike looked around to make sure no one else was nearby. "I'm going to tell you something," he said in a low voice. "But if you repeat it, I'll deny I ever told you." His expression was deadly serious. Then he told me the story. Another couple had been at the farm before, Seth Garcia and his wife, Laurel. They'd come down from Yakima not long after Mike and Claire had arrived, and the four of them had grown close. Seth had a quick temper and wore his emotions on his sleeve, but he was a good man and fiercely loyal. He and Mike had worked side by side for months. Seth's situation sounded disturbingly familiar. Out of nowhere, Silas started paying attention to them, especially to Laurel. Laurel, Mike said, was a striking blonde. Not long after Silas took an interest, Seth changed. He became distant, withdrawn, clearly troubled. Mike tried to talk to him, but Seth wouldn't open up. For days, Seth barely showed up to work. When he did, it was only briefly before disappearing again. No one ever explained what happened. Rumors floated around, something about a confrontation between Seth and Silas, with Laurel caught in the middle, but everyone learned quickly that asking questions about Silas was dangerous. People simply didn't pry. "Remember at dinner when you asked about that blonde on stage with Silas?" Mike asked. I nodded. "That was Laurel," he said quietly. "Seth's wife." He paused, then added, "That's all I know. But Wyatt, be careful. Gunther and that band, they're not the kind of people you want to mess with." "Now that I think about it, I haven't seen Laurel around for a while either," Claire commented, her voice casual but edged with curiosity. She flicked a quick glance in my direction before she and Mike drifted off, leaving me standing alone with even more questions than before our afternoon walk. My thoughts returned to the chaos in the courtyard, the shouting, the hurried footsteps, and that lone figure sprinting away. It had to have been Seth Garcia. I was almost certain he was the same estranged brother Silas had mentioned over dinner, the one whose life had fallen apart. Later that night, Gemma was unusually animated. She could hardly contain herself as she told me about the long conversation she'd had with Tom and Silas regarding the expansion of the retail farm store. Business was booming at the Grants Pass Road location, and she seemed genuinely thrilled to be part of their new plans. They'd already begun mapping out a fresh strategy, and Gemma couldn't stop praising Silas's vision. She loved being invited into those discussions, proud that her opinions mattered. Silas had even asked for her continued input in future meetings. There was talk of opening another store on the south side of Grants Pass, one Gemma might personally manage. The thought clearly excited her. Then she turned toward me, waiting for my reaction. "So, more late-night meetings then?" I asked cautiously. "Wyatt," she said gently, "Silas explained that we all have to make sacrifices if we want the farm to grow. I'll miss spending those evenings with you, but in the long run, it's going to be worth it." There was something pleading in her expression, almost righteous, like she wanted me to understand without questioning her. Arguing felt pointless. Still, after what Mike and Claire had hinted at earlier, I was more certain than ever that I needed to keep my eyes open, especially about whatever was hidden in that mysterious C-file. The following days passed quietly, almost deceptively normal. But one evening, Gemma failed to appear at our usual cafeteria table after work. No message, no explanation, just nothing. I ended up sitting with Mike and Claire, and they immediately asked, "Where's Gemma?" "I don't know," I said, the words heavier than I intended. Claire glanced at Mike, and the two exchanged a look I couldn't quite read, heavy, questioning, almost accusatory. A few of Gemma's co-workers from the retail store were also at dinner. I debated whether to track her down. Our cars were parked outside in the wide, paved lot, vehicles we were technically allowed to use, though few of us ever did. In all my time at Hidden Valley Farm, I'd only driven mine twice. After dinner, worry nagging at me, I headed to the lot to check if Gemma might still be at the store. But when I got there, I found a thick chain stretched across the exit, secured with a heavy padlock. There was no way out. I returned to the cottage, restless and frustrated. By midnight, I switched off the lights and climbed into bed, uneasy and angry, but too drained to stay awake. At some point, I drifted into a shallow, uneasy sleep, until the sound of the front door creaking open jolted me awake. Gemma slipped inside, moving quietly, and went straight to the bathroom. The shower roared to life. When she finally emerged, towel in hand, I asked where she'd been. "With Silas," she said after a beat, "and a few others." "At 1:20 in the morning?" I pressed, now fully awake. "Wyatt, I'm exhausted," she muttered. "Can we talk about this tomorrow?" She wrapped herself in a blanket and sank into the chair. I burned with questions: where she'd been, who she was with, what they were really doing. But when I kept pushing, she grabbed her pillow and blanket and stormed off to the couch in the main room. I didn't follow. I knew I wouldn't get answers tonight. Eventually, sleep came, heavy and unsettled. By morning, she was gone again. She must have left early to avoid the inevitable confrontation. In all our years together, I'd occasionally felt flashes of jealousy, but I had never doubted Gemma's loyalty. Until now. She looked more striking than ever lately. It wasn't surprising people noticed. But Silas was different. That arrogant, godlike confidence he carried. When he wanted something or someone, he rarely failed to get it. That night, I planned to confront her about everything. Hidden Valley, Silas, the endless late nights, but she never came home. By midnight, I gave up waiting and went to bed. When I woke at 4 in the morning, the house was still empty. The silence was unbearable. My doubts crystallized into certainty. She was with Silas. Dark thoughts began to take root. Betrayal, anger, the need for retribution. Revenge became my only clear objective. But unlike Seth Garcia, I wouldn't lose control. No shouting, no public scenes. My retaliation would be deliberate, precise. And the key to everything was that C file. I was convinced Silas, with April's help and maybe others, was siphoning profits from the farm into a secret account. Untaxed, unreported, stolen from every shareholder involved. That file held the proof I needed. Later that afternoon, I entered the business office, forcing a smile, acting as though nothing was wrong despite the storm raging inside me over Gemma's absence. I kept my focus on the plan. When the moment was right, I handed Claire a folder. Inside, a single sticky note read, "Meet me on the trail behind the barn at lunch." From the edge of my vision, I noticed the subtle stiffening of her shoulders, the exact instant she spotted the note I'd left behind. Her gaze darted toward me, locking with mine. There was no acknowledgement in her eyes, no silent understanding, no confirmation of what she felt. When the lunch bell rang, I slipped away before anyone else could leave, heading straight for the barn. 15 minutes later, Claire arrived, Mike trailing close behind her. "Wyatt, this is dangerous," Mike said, his tone flat and unyielding, tension carved into his expression. I barely spared him a glance and focused on Claire. "This won't take long," I told her quietly. "Just one question. Are April's passwords in the top right drawer of her desk?" Claire froze, eyes flicking nervously between Mike and me. "Wyatt!" Mike cut in, his voice heavy with warning. "That's enough," he said after a beat. "We care about you, we really do. But we have our own lives to think about." His stare was like stone, and after a moment, he gave Claire a small, firm nod. "Yes," she whispered finally. "Her username is Aman at hvflc.com. The password's on a yellow slip in the top right drawer." They turned and left without waiting for me to respond, without giving me a chance to thank them. Back at work, Claire kept her distance for the rest of the day. I didn't resent her for it, not in the slightest. What I was planning was reckless, dangerous. That night, I returned to my cottage. The place felt empty, stripped of warmth, though none of Gemma's belongings were missing. I sank into a chair and tried to plan my next move, running through scenario after scenario in my head. Half an hour passed before footsteps shattered the silence. Gemma stepped inside, followed by Ed Gunther, one of Silas's muscle-bound enforcers, and Silas himself. Their sudden presence left me wary and tense. They filed into the main room. I rose cautiously to my feet. Gemma started toward me, arms lifting halfway like she meant to embrace me. I stopped her with an open palm. She froze, swallowing hard, a stifled gag catching in her throat. but no tears followed. The man who once promised her everything, her husband, was rejecting her now, rejecting. Shaken, she retreated toward Silas. He slipped an arm over her shoulders, pulling her in close, and she leaned against him as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The silence in the room pressed down, suffocating. "What do you all want?" I asked evenly, though my chest was a storm. "Wyatt," Silas began, measured and deliberate. "I know this will hurt to hear, but listen. I've got a plan. I'm not trying to destroy what you and Gemma have, but I can't run this farm without her. I need her knowledge, her support. It doesn't have to interfere with your marriage." I stared at him, disbelief sharpening into something darker. Ed Gunther shifted forward, half a step closer. I wanted to wipe the smug calm from Silas's face, but I couldn't take both of them, not now. "Wyatt, I understand this is hard," Silas went on, "but this is about more than either of us. It's about the community surviving. We've developed strategies for retail that could transform the farm's future. Gemma has been instrumental in that, and so have you." He paused, studying me. "Try to see the bigger picture. Do this for everyone." His words were dangerously convincing. For a moment I almost believed him. As he spoke, I glanced at Gemma. Her face was tense, unreadable, but I knew that look. Where had I seen it before? The memory hit me suddenly, vivid and unshakable. Years ago, the night Reggie Lake dragged her from that party. Back then, that same expression had been nothing but pure devotion. "So," I said quietly, my voice low, "you're enjoying yourself with him?" Her gasp sliced the air. Gunther moved in closer, menace radiating from him. Silas shook his head slowly, almost pitying. "Wyatt, I understand. This is painful. Gemma's closeness with me. Yes, even her sharing my bed, that's real. But it's a small sacrifice for something greater than us. I'm asking you to put aside the hurt. Think about the future. Not just yours, but everyone's here at Hidden Valley." His words echoed the speeches he'd given long ago about sacrifice. Back then, I thought sacrifice meant long hours, hard work, lost comforts. Never once did I think he'd ask me to give up my marriage. "Ed and I are leaving now," Silas said finally. "I trust there won't be any trouble. This is your chance to process everything, to work it out with Gemma." His eyes met mine, solemn. "Wyatt, you're important to this community. Thank you for what you're giving up for the greater good." And then he was gone. Gunther followed, the door closing behind them. Gemma was the only one left. She stepped toward me cautiously, arms reaching for a hug. I didn't respond. My arms hung limp at my sides even as she pressed herself against me. I felt nothing. No rage, no affection, only the crushing awareness that the first fracture in our marriage had already split wide open. "Wyatt, please," Gemma whispered, her voice trembling. "Talk to me. I know you're hurt. I know you're angry, but this is just a small part of our lives. Can't you see that?" "In a few short weeks, I'll be back in our cottage for good. That's the plan. Or at least, it's what she's been promising with that bright, dreamy grin of hers, the kind that pretends we've already made it. According to her, this place is where we'll grow old together, where we'll finally belong. And until then, I'm supposed to watch her and Silas enjoy their perfect little arrangement and keep my mouth shut. For the greater good, she calls it. She's lost it. I keep silent. "Wyatt, I love you," she tells me, voice soft but urgent. "And I love Hidden Valley Farm. This place, it's better than anywhere we've ever been. We could build something real here, not just for us. Everyone who comes here would feel it. Silas needs me to help him expand, and once we do, nothing can stop us." Her words keep coming, tumbling over each other, soaked in conviction. "You and I could be part of something bigger than ourselves," she says. Maybe she picked that up from Silas, or maybe she's learned to parrot his lofty speeches. I'll give her this. She believes it, every single word. I don't. "I deserve this," she adds, almost to herself. Then her eyes lock onto mine, sharp, intense, and she whispers, "We deserve this life. Together." That's how she always talks, about what she deserves, like life owes her something. I keep my face blank, not a flicker of emotion, not even when I mutter, "I'm going to dinner," and walk out. She stands there, waiting for me to explode, rage, tears, anything, but nothing comes. They say indifference is the true opposite of love. That night, I proved them right. The anger was there, burning under my skin, but I kept it buried. My voice stayed steady. My face stayed calm. "Wyatt, wait!" she calls after me, rushing to catch up. "I'll come too." I turn slowly, watching her hopeful half smile, like she thinks she's winning me back. "Do you honestly think I want to be seen with you?" I ask, even, sharp. "Everyone here knows about you and the fearless leader," I add, my tone flat. "The least I can do is act like I'm not okay with my wife sleeping with him." Her face goes rigid, shock, anger, shame, all at once. She hasn't realized how fast rumors spread around Hidden Valley Farm. "And one more thing, don't sit next to me tonight." I leave without another word. Later, she turns up at the cottage anyway. She hovers between forced small talk and quiet crying, her phone lighting up every so often. Silas, obviously. We sleep in the same bed, but that's all. She tries to reach for me once, but I shut it down with nothing more than my silence. First time I've ever turned her away. The next morning feels almost normal. Chores, work, routine. But my mind's already working the angles. April, the office, her computer. I need that file. That evening, Gemma comes back again. I half expect her to run to Silas, but she doesn't. A text pings on her phone. She glances at it, murmurs, "Wonder what that's about." "What?" I ask, playing casual. She startles, almost forgot I was there, then shrugs it off. "Just a meeting tomorrow," she mutters, vague. I press for details. She dodges every question. Whatever's in that message, I need to know. Her password isn't the problem. Getting the phone is. She clings to it everywhere, even in the shower. That's when the idea clicks. "Gemma," I say softly. Her eyes lift, cautious. "I know I've been rough. I hate what's happening with Silas. But maybe I can put it aside, for now." She freezes, searching my face. "Let's make up," I add quietly. She doesn't hesitate, throws herself into my arms, kissing me like forgiveness is oxygen. I kiss her back just enough to sell it. She thinks we're healing. I'm just getting closer to what I need. "Why don't you take the outdoor shower first?" I suggest lightly. "I'll join you in a minute." She beams, grabs her phone, and heads to the bathroom. I follow, lock the door casually, wait until the water starts running. Then I see it, her phone on the counter. In seconds, it's unlocked. I scroll through her messages. There it is. Tom Jennings, meeting tomorrow, 2 p.m. Executive office, Silas's house. Attendees, Tom, Ed, Gemma, Silas, and April. That's it. The opening I've been waiting for. "Wyatt?" she calls from the shower. "What's taking so long?" "Be right there," I answer, sliding the phone back exactly where I found it. I know it then. Tonight will be my last night here. Our last night together. And I can feel it in my gut. This farm's about to change in ways nobody sees coming. I don't tell her any of that. We drift off side by side, masks of calm on our faces, hiding very different truths. By morning, I'm already moving. I pack light, phone, wallet, keys, iPad, a change of clothes. Nothing that screams I'm gone. At work, my nerves won't quit. I can't stay still. Claire notices. She always notices. But she says nothing. She and Mike have been keeping their distance anyway. Can't blame them. They know I'm plotting something. They just don't know what. During my lunch break, I slip away from everyone, using the solitude to untangle my thoughts and map out what needs to happen next. By the time I return to my desk, I'm jittery, counting every tick of the clock until it finally hits 2. The second it does, I head straight for April's office. I stop in the doorway, trying to look casual, my hands clasped behind me. I've prepared harmless, routine questions, mundane accounting stuff that has nothing to do with the hidden C account. As I drone on, her patience evaporates. She glances at her watch, visibly annoyed. "Wyatt, this is basic," she cuts me off, her voice flat. "You already know this. I have a flight to catch for a meeting. If you need help, go to Claire." While she stuffs her laptop into its case, she doesn't see me quietly press a strip of heavy-duty clear tape over the strike plate in the doorframe. If I've timed this right, the lock won't catch when she closes it. I've watched her routine enough times to know exactly what's about to happen. She'll shut the door, assume it's secure, and walk away without checking. I keep her talking, empty chatter, while leaning lightly against the door so it feels solid when she pulls it shut. She's already halfway down the hall before I call after her, "Safe travels!" She doesn't answer. I wait 60 full seconds to be sure she's gone. When nothing happens, no footsteps, no sudden return, I move. Claire's eyes meet mine. I put a finger to my lips. Her sharp exhale says she knows exactly what I'm doing but won't interfere. I slip into April's office, peel away the tape, and open the top right drawer. Inside is the note with her login credentials. Powering up her computer, I enter her username and password. Ridiculously, it's April Simon Forever. Then plug my flash drive into the port. The C folder is massive. Transferring everything will take minutes. While the files copy, I step back into the hallway like nothing's happening. Claire stares at me, pale, unnerved. I give her a subtle shake of my head. Don't panic. That's when Belinda saunters in, striking up pointless small talk with Claire, a distraction I can't afford. I improvise. Calling Claire over for help draws her away from Belinda long enough that Belinda eventually drifts off. The second she's gone, I dive back into April's office. The transfer is done. Perfect. But as I look up, Belinda reappears, catching sight of me where I absolutely shouldn't be. Her confused stare says it all. Why is he in there? That office is locked. She retreats to her desk, suspicion written all over her face. I whisper to Claire, "Cover for me. You'll have to report me later, otherwise they'll think you're involved." She blinks, lost, but I don't have time to explain. "Trust me," I add, already slipping away. My backpack slung over one shoulder, I jog, not sprint, down the hallways, careful not to draw attention. Outside, the parking lot's exit is still chained off, no vehicles getting through. Running is my only option. Grants Pass is 22 miles away. Fortunately, the Greenbelt trails cut straight through the hills. I've run parts of them before. After months at Hidden Valley Farm, my body's leaner, tougher. I've run 2 marathons. 22 miles? I can handle it. But time isn't on my side. I figure 30 minutes, maybe less, before they realize I'm missing and start searching. I push hard, running. Nearly 3 hours later, I stagger into Grants Pass and head for the bus station. Still no sign of a search party. A bus to Sacramento leaves in 20 minutes. I buy a ticket and climb aboard. By the time I reach Sacramento, it's late. Exhausted, I find a cheap, grimy motel and collapse. The next morning, I call my cousin Shasta in Portland. Trying to explain everything is impossible. She doesn't understand, but she wants to help. Problem is, she can't spare 2 days to drive down and back. I can't blame her. Shasta promises to check with her boyfriend, Zeke, to see if he knows anyone who can assist. To my surprise, he delivers. Some of his friends are in Reno, heading north, and willing to swing through Sacramento to pick me up. For the first time in days, relief hits me. I silently forgive every unkind thought I've ever had about Zeke. I spend another day holed up in the motel, lying low. My nerves are frayed. Every creak outside the door sounds like pursuit. My phone buzzes with messages from Gemma. "Where are you? Did you leave the farm? I miss you. Everyone's looking for you." I can only picture the chaos I've left behind. The next day, Zeke's friends arrive. 3 of them, Robert, Banjo, and Hoss. And unbelievably, they show up in helicopters. Picture them, scuffed leather jackets, wild beards, the kind of men who looked allergic to soap. Broad shoulders, hard eyes, danger walking on two legs. Strangely, their presence calmed me. I needed to vanish into the background, and no one hunting me would think to check among people like this. We rumbled north toward Portland, wind roaring through the open van windows. At first, I felt like I'd been dropped into another planet. They couldn't have been more unlike me. But after a few dozen miles, I realized they weren't half as rough as they appeared, sharper even, than I would have guessed. It struck me how deceptive looks can be. That was true of Silas, too. During those endless hours on the road, I couldn't stop my thoughts drifting back to him, and to the farm. Sure, Silas had put the whole operation together. I'd known that. But for those of us who'd invested, poured savings into the place, I was only now seeing how skewed the deal really was. We'd been fleeced, overcharged for the privilege of working land we didn't even own. The setup fattened Silas's pockets more than anyone else's. Residents paid to stay there, and then labored for free. The so-called profit sharing was a joke, a token scrap he tossed to keep us quiet. And underneath it all, I knew Silas was running something darker, moving cash off the books, maybe offshore, definitely untouchable. April was tangled up in it. Probably Tom Jennings, too. In just a few months, I'd watched enough money pass through to know it ran into the millions. By the time we rolled into Portland at dusk, I'd made some hard decisions. Hoss, Banjo, the rest of them followed me to my place. Shasta and Zeke were already there. We ordered pizza for me, beer for them, and pretended life was ordinary for a night. Shasta peppered me with questions. Where's Gemma? What really went down at Hidden Valley? What's your plan now? Her version of events wasn't far off, maybe even closer to the truth than I wanted to admit. But I couldn't talk about it yet. Not about Gemma, not about Silas, not about my marriage collapsing in real time. The grief still throbbed, the fury still burned, the betrayal still felt fresh enough to bleed. One thing was clear, though. My path forward was about to change. For the moment, that meant lying low in the garage apartment. Before I went to bed, I hid the flash drive where no one would ever think to look, inside a hollow spot under a concrete block in the garage floor. I hadn't warned Shasta and Zeke about what might be coming. People from the farm, especially Ed Gunther, wouldn't simply fade away. Morning found me restless. I scribbled a list, hire a divorce lawyer, call Damon Claiborne at the IRS, track down Seth Garcia, Mike's friend who'd disappeared after that blow-up with Silas. My gaze wandered to the driveway. Shasta was home. She needed to be ready. If Gunther showed up, she had to know what she was walking into. I dialed her. As we talked, a black Suburban rolled up to the house. Gunther. He'd been watching me. Hide, I whispered. One of the farm guys is here. This could go bad. I hung up while she shouted for answers I couldn't give. By the time I stepped outside, Gunther and two others were climbing out. This is private property, I said, standing my ground. Get off it. His face twisted into something ugly. He didn't reply. He just came at me, the other two circling wide, practiced and efficient. They'd done this before. Gunther raised a stun gun. The jolt slammed into me, ripping a scream from my throat before darkness swallowed me whole. I came to strap to a wooden chair, duct tape cutting into my arms. The garage reeked of oil and blood, my blood. Gunther loomed over me, two muscle-bound shadows at his back. This wasn't bluffing anymore. This was serious. Where's the file? He asked. I said nothing. A fist crashed into my jaw, exploding pain across my face. White stars danced in front of me. This can go easy, the bald one murmured, mocking. Or hard. My boys like hard. They could use the workout. Blood pooled in my mouth. I spat it at his boots. I've got nothing. Another hit. Something cracked, maybe teeth. The copper taste flooded my tongue. Get the bag, Gunther ordered. One thug slipped outside, came back with a canvas sack. Gunther pulled out a set of wire cutters, thick-jawed, cold steel. My stomach turned. Last chance, he hissed. Where's the file? Sweat slicked his scalp. I stayed silent, fists clenched. "Hold his hand," Gunther said. One of them wrenched my pinky free. The cutters bit down. Pressure. A sharp snap. Fire shot up my arm, then blackness. When I surfaced again, I was screaming. My severed finger lay in a puddle of blood at my feet. "That's one," Gunther said, almost cheerful. 9 to go. After that, we get creative." The thug chuckled low. "Accountants need fingers, right?" Gunther sing-songed. His voice dropped to a growl. "Where's the goddamn file?" The pain was so savage I couldn't even form words. If the opportunity were mine this very second, I'd spill everything to him, no holding back. The brute grips my hand in a vice, forcing one finger straight against my will. Gunther shoots me a sidelong glance, shakes his head, and quietly positions the blade cutter. A deafening roar erupts outside before he can press down, shaking the walls of the cramped garage. I recognize the sound instantly, dozens of Harley engines revving in unison, vibrating through the floor. Gunther drops the cutter without thinking, hand flying to the pistol tucked in his shoulder holster. With a sharp flick of his fingers, he orders his 2 men to spread out. They hesitate for a split second, uncertain, and then the door slams open. Zeke, Banjo, and 5 more bikers charge inside. Gunther's gun is already drawn, so are theirs. The newcomers aren't empty-handed either. Every one of them is armed. My mangled hand screams with pain, clouding my focus, but one fact cuts through the haze. Zeke and his crew have arrived just in time to stop Gunther from severing another finger. "Gentlemen," Gunther says, forcing a crooked smile through clenched teeth. His voice trembles despite the bravado. "Looks like we've got ourselves a little standoff." 7 against 3. The math is hopelessly against him. "Mister," Zeke replies calmly, his eyes locked on Gunther, "I think we can settle this." The faint calm in his tone makes Gunther relax. Barely. He mistakes it for negotiation. "Hoss!" Zeke barks suddenly, never breaking eye contact. A single shot rings out. The bullet drills straight into the center of Gunther's forehead. He goes still, stunned, and collapses without a word. The last 2 of Gunther's men freeze, hands lifting high in surrender. "Drop 'em!" Zeke orders. Their guns clatter to the floor instantly. Relief floods through me, even as dizziness threatens to drag me into unconsciousness. Moments later, Shasta rushes in, frantic and desperate to get me to a hospital. Zeke shakes his head. "Can't risk questions about what happened here," he mutters. "We'll fix Wyatt up ourselves. Clean this place top to bottom." His eyes sweep the room, calculating every move. The cleanup is swift and merciless. Gunther's body and his 2 men are shoved into a Suburban with mechanical precision. The convoy of Harleys forms an escort, riding east. Later, I'd hear whispers that the bodies were never seen again, the vehicle dismantled and scrubbed clean. I never asked for details. I didn't want them. Days pass before Zeke approaches me. "You want your share?" he asks casually. "My share of what?" I stare at him, confused. He explains, Gunther, his 2 goons, and the Suburban had been carrying about 30 grand. I wave it off, telling him to split it between Robert, Haas, and Banjo. I make sure he knows how grateful I am, even if I can't put it into words. Sure, I lost a finger, but in Zeke's world, missing digits are practically part of the uniform. Most of his crew are down a few themselves. I'm not sure that's a badge I want to wear. One of them, definitely no surgeon, patches me up awkwardly, resetting what's left of the hand. At least Gunther's tools were sharp. The cut is clean, almost surgical. It could have been uglier. A few days later, I'm back on my feet and pushing forward. For now, I figure HVF won't come after me, at least not immediately. Monday morning, I call the IRS office where Damon Claiborne works. He's out, but his secretary slots me for Wednesday at 11 a.m. That afternoon, riding a borrowed Harley, I point myself toward Yakima. Word is Seth and Laurel Garcia, former HVF members, are holed up in a small town nearby called Sala. I don't bother warning them I'm coming. I've never met either of them, but people warned me about Seth's temper. The address leads me to a weather-beaten house on a dusty street with no sidewalks. A battered pickup squats in the driveway like it hasn't moved in weeks. My left hand wrapped in bandages, I climb the short path to the door and knock. It swings open fast. A dark-haired man in his 30s, unshaven and rough-edged, stands there. Even without an introduction, I know this is Seth Garcia. "What do you want?" he asks, voice flat, not hostile but not inviting either. "My name's Wyatt Weller," I begin carefully. "I was at Hidden Valley Faye—" "Get out," he snaps, fury sparking at the farm's name. "Seth, wait, you don't understand," I say quickly, raising my bandaged hand. "Gunther and his crew did this to me. I left last week. Silas took my wife." He freezes. The door, halfway closed, stops. He studies me for a moment, then silently steps aside and waves me in. I tell him everything, or almost everything. I leave out the part about Zeke disposing of Gunther and his men. I describe Silas's obsession with Gemma, his twisted sermons about sacrifice, the so-called greater good of the farm. Seth isn't surprised. He's heard it all before. Drawing him out is dangerous. His anger sits just beneath the surface, boiling into violent fantasies about killing Silas, torching the place, strangling him with his bare hands. My hatred for Silas is deep, but Seth's burns hotter, feral and unrestrained. "So what's the move?" he finally asks, eyes locked on mine. I sketch out possible angles: tax fraud, legal leverage, maybe a settlement to force Silas's hand. "Bullshit!" Seth cuts me off. "I don't want him cornered. I want him gone." We start laying out options. Garcia eventually came to grips with what I had known all along. Slipping onto the farm undetected and getting anywhere near Silas for revenge simply wasn't realistic. I managed to talk him down from his wild idea of wreaking large-scale havoc. There were too many workers and families on that property who had nothing to do with Silas's crimes. After a long stretch of pushback, he finally relented. That left the burden squarely on me. I knew I would have to finish this alone. The information I needed came from Seth, though his contempt for me had become nearly unbearable. As I walked out of his place, he muttered, "If you catch wind of that bastard anywhere off the farm, you'd better let me know." I gave him my word I would. By the time Wednesday rolled around, I already had a meeting scheduled with Claiborne, the IRS investigator assigned to the case. In the days after leaving Hidden Valley Farm, Gemma's emails kept arriving in my inbox. There was something unnerving in her tone. She wrote as if she believed my absence was only temporary, like I was traveling for work and would return to her and the farm soon enough. Each message contained updates about Silas's latest schemes and bold expansions, as though she thought I still cared about their dreams. I responded occasionally, just enough to keep the line open, but never in any depth. By Wednesday morning, I was standing in the IRS office in downtown Portland, clean-shaven, showered, and dressed to look like someone who belonged there. In my head, I had pictured an IRS agent as a tired, middle-aged man, pale, balding, maybe a cheap brown suit hanging off him. Damon Claiborne was nothing like that. He looked no older than 35, about 5'8", wiry but strong. His tailored charcoal suit was sharp, his thick-rimmed glasses perfectly straight, his tie knotted with precision. African-American, composed, intimidating in the best possible way, he was exactly the kind of man I wanted on this. He greeted me with brisk formality and wasted no time. Straight into questions: my history with Hidden Valley Farm, my connection to HVF LLC, every piece of involvement I'd ever had. I told him everything. Not once did he mention the injury to my hand. When I finally finished, Claiborne leaned back slightly and said, "Helpful, Mr. Weller, but most of this? We already knew. What we don't have," he added, "is proof." That was when I slid the flash drive across the desk. His entire demeanor changed, eyes narrowing, posture stiffening. I told him where it came from, what was on it, how I got it. He excused himself to have his team examine it and asked me to wait. 2 hours later, Claiborne returned. This time, He was smiling. "Mr. Weller," he said, "thank you. The IRS Criminal Investigations Division is moving on violations of tax law, the Bank Secrecy Act, and suspected money laundering. Once we confirm what you've given us, this goes straight to the Department of Justice. And with this, we finally have confirmation." Then he asked the question that mattered. "Will you testify?" I nodded without hesitation. "Mr. Weller," he said, extending his hand, "are you familiar with the federal whistleblower program under the False Claims Act?" I admitted I knew the name, but not the specifics. He explained, "If your information helps the government recover money obtained through fraud, you're eligible to receive up to 25% of whatever is recovered. I've already started the paperwork on your behalf for the funds HVFLLC hid offshore through those C-file transfers." I thanked him, but he shook his head. "No, Mr. Weller," Claiborne said, gripping my hand firmly. "Thank you." Walking out of that building, I felt the machine finally beginning to turn. At last, something was happening. Still, I couldn't help but wonder, what came next? When I pressed Claiborne on their next steps, he laid it out with precise calm. "It's going to move quickly," he assured me. The very next thing I did was contact a divorce attorney. He advised drafting something like a prenuptial agreement. I offered Gemma every share I still held in Hidden Valley Farm. In return, she agreed to relinquish any claim to my other property. Aside from the house I'd owned before we married, there was almost nothing to divide. She wouldn't lose a thing, and she would never hear a word about the whistleblower payout. I set up a meeting with my bank, took out a modest loan with the house as collateral, and secured enough working capital to carry me into whatever came next. Little by little, news trickled in, through headlines, Gemma's emails, and quiet hints from Claiborne. Silas had somehow caught wind of the impending federal raid. Before agents arrived at Hidden Valley Farm, he and Gemma had already vanished, fleeing to Ecuador. It was a smart move. Ecuador's extradition treaty with the U.S. was notoriously weak. Back at the farm, federal agents arrested Tom in April, 2 executives from HVFLLC. They seized computers, locked down the property, and gave the residents a week to clear out. The farm's entire operation froze overnight. Every asset, even the offshore account labeled C, was confiscated. Then, unexpectedly, Gemma started writing to me again. Her tone was almost accusatory. Did I have anything to do with the raid? I lied, of course, said I was as blindsided as everyone else. She described the raid as a setback, nothing more. She remained convinced Silas's genius would resurrect the farm soon. Her messages read like worship, praise for Silas's brilliance, his vision, his unmatched insight. She called him a friend, but the way she wrote about him felt almost devotional. I played my part, spoke of marriage plans, hinted that she should hold on to our shares for the farm's sake, and waited to see where she'd take it. Meanwhile, I tracked down Zeke. I needed forged identification, serious quality, not some amateur fake. For a legit passport license, the whole set, Zeke said. You're looking at 10 grand. 10,000? I repeated, running the numbers in my head. How fast can you make it happen? Roughly a week after the photograph first lands in our hands, a response finally arrives. It doesn't come with any fanfare, more like it had been waiting for the right moment to surface. Later that day, I pick up the phone and dial Seth Garcia's landline. I tell him there's something important he needs to hear, and before hanging up, I add one more request. Could he stop by Walgreens, get some passport photos taken, and mail them to me? To my surprise, Seth agrees without asking why. Around the same time, Gemma answers the email I sent earlier. She says she's talked things over with Silas, and he's fine with her holding onto the stock. She's ready to sign the prenup. I tell her the agreement only becomes official once it's notarized. She'll have to print it, sign it in front of a notary, and send the completed copy back. A few days later, everything falls into place. Gemma forwards me an address in Cuenca, Ecuador, and I immediately ship the papers there. The next day, I'm holding a fake ID in my hand, $1,000 poorer but strangely relieved. Seth Garcia now exists on paper as Oscar Lindar. For another $2,000, Zeke's partner secures delivery of a second package bound for Selah, Washington. Inside, a second fake ID, a battered passport, a driver's license, several inactive credit cards, $5,000 in cash, and the address in Cuenca. Seth will know what it means. The machinery is finally moving. For the first time in weeks, I feel like I can breathe. I call Damon Claiborne to check in, and he tells me my whistleblower payout has been approved. Oddly enough, the government, usually known for delays, is pushing this one through faster than expected. Still, Damon warns, we'll have to wait. I pitch him an idea. What if we gathered all the signatories needed for the reward into a single meeting? Damon says he'll try to arrange it. 2 days later, his assistant calls. Be at the Federal Building, 4th floor conference room, 10 a.m. Friday, she says. I confirm. Nearly a week passes since Garcia received the package. No word from him. Then another email from Gemma arrives, full of praise for Silas's brilliance, excitement about Hidden Valley Farm's future, and her eagerness to see me again. Friday morning, I head to the Federal Building, paperwork carefully tucked into a folder. Maybe this is the break I've been waiting for. Security escorts me into a large conference room where Damon greets me warmly and introduces me to his supervisor, Karen Natalie, and another official, Chris Waverly. Damon summarizes my role in uncovering Hidden Valley's scheme. Mr. Weller, none of this would have been possible without you, Karen says, smiling. Your reward has already been cleared, so you can take some comfort in that. I nod. She adds that while approval is one thing, actual payouts can take years. The government now controls the farm itself, but seizing its bank accounts, especially those hidden offshore, will be a slow grind. I tell her I understand, but I have a proposal. She gestures for me to continue. The reward can be up to 25%, correct? I ask. She nods. I want my 25% as a portion of the property itself, I say. That's my request. I pass out packets outlining the plan. The section I've marked, unbeknownst to them, the most valuable part of Hidden Valley, includes the luxury cabin, 7 guest cottages Gemma and I once stayed in, and the most fertile cropland. The room falls quiet as they read. Damon seems to favor the idea. Karen looks surprised, though interested. Finally, she says, I've never seen anyone make this kind of request. We'll need to review it, but honestly, it might be workable. Give me a week for an answer. I leave cautiously optimistic, but far from celebrating. Later, Damon explains that the government wants to move quickly on certain cases, which could work in my favor. He also notes that once I'm operating my share of the farm, tax revenue from its profits will start rolling in, a detail the IRS always appreciates. Frozen assets don't earn them a dime. By Sunday night, breaking news hits. Leader of controversial commune found murdered in Ecuador. The report is brief. Silas Brand, 48, found dead in a villa in Cuenca. Local authorities confirm the suspect also died during the confrontation. A woman at the scene, unnamed, survived. The suspect's identity hasn't been released. The investigation is ongoing. I stare at the TV, stunned. I knew I was deep in this mess, but I never imagined it would end like this, or this fast. A heavy weight settles in my chest. Most of all, I can't stop thinking about Seth Garcia. Though my time with him had been brief, I could feel the weight of his suffering. I never wanted his life to end like that. Then Gemma's emails began arriving. They were sprawling, emotional letters, meditations on how senseless it was for someone so gifted to die. She wrote as if Silas had carried off a fragment of her soul when he passed away. I've stopped replying, yet her messages keep coming, one after the next. Then, on Friday, my phone rang. Damon Claiborne. For the first time in months, I heard news that felt like a reprieve. The IRS had conditionally accepted my settlement proposal. There was still an ocean of forms to complete, and a meeting scheduled with the county to inventory the farm's holdings. It would be a slow process, but at least the gears were finally turning. I thanked Damon for the update. Wyatt, I should be thanking you, he said. This deal got me promoted. Couldn't have done it without your cooperation. If there's ever anything you need from me, Damon, name it, I told him. He paused, almost amused. I might take you up on that one day. When the call ended, I sat back and let the moment sink in. The last few months had been brutal. I'd spent that time working hand in hand with Josephine County. Even with officials eager to push things through, the bureaucracy was relentless. It felt like a lifetime had passed since Gemma and I first stumbled upon Hidden Valley Farm. We'd met good people there. Mike and Claire came to mind immediately. I thought about the farm's fresh produce, the strange vitality that came from living that way. And I thought about Gemma, how close we'd been in those early days. But the memories inevitably turned darker. April's chaotic accounting, Ed Gunther and his crew squeezing laborers for pennies, and worst of all, Silas. Silas, with his disarming charm, drawing Gemma toward him and dismantling my marriage just to entertain himself. I resented her for it too. She had always been drawn to men like him. I should have remembered her history with Reggie Lake. Back then, I'd written off her years with Reggie as a youthful mistake. Clearly, I'd been wrong. Enduring that betrayal was unthinkable. And yet I wondered, could I start over? Could I build a new Hidden Valley Farm? Something better? I believed I could, if I found the right people to help me. Months later, Hidden Valley Farm 2.0 was alive. Smaller, yes, but thriving, growing our own crops and selling them locally. I'd taken an abandoned hillside and planted grapevines that would, in a few years, produce wine. New plans stirred constantly in my mind, which I shared with the team. Mike and Claire came back, Mike running the fields and Claire managing operations. Finn and Summer returned as well, taking charge of the marijuana grow. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from Damon Claiborne. We exchanged greetings, and I filled him in on the farm's progress. Curious, I asked about his work. That's actually why I'm calling, he said. Have you heard from Gemma lately? Gemma? I asked. Not really, just the occasional email. I don't even know where she's living. Last I heard she was in Ecuador. Why? He hesitated. Let me put it this way. There's a large sum of money missing from an offshore account. The last trace led to Silas, in Ecuador. Now Silas is gone, and Gemma's the only lead we have. I promised him I'd reach out if she contacted me. That ended the call. Life at Hidden Valley Farm 2.0 had settled into a rhythm. About 10 of us lived and worked there. Claire, Mike, and I decided to reopen the retail store, the most profitable venture of the old farm. Angela, one of the original crew, screened candidates and set up interviews for the manager role. I conducted the final interviews myself. Several applicants seemed promising. Then the last candidate walked through the door, Gemma. The sight of her knocked the air out of me. Months had passed since I'd last seen her, and she still carried that same striking presence. Desire, hurt, and anger crashed over me in equal measure, though I kept my face neutral. When she stepped in for a hug, I offered only a handshake. She looked startled, even a little embarrassed by my reserve. We sat down to begin. Before we start, I said evenly, I need to make a quick call. I stepped out for a moment, then returned with a polite smile and resumed the interview. Sorry for the formality, I said lightly. I'm trying a new process. Do you mind if I record this? She gave a small smile. Go ahead, Wyatt. If it helps you, record it. All right, I said, starting the recorder. Tell me why you think you're the right fit for this job. I asked her the same questions I'd asked the others, keeping my tone measured. The recorder captured every word. Indeed, Wyatt. She looked at me, eyes wide with a mix of surprise and disbelief. You know my roots are in retail, she began slowly, as if needing me to really hear her. I ran a store once, oversaw its growth from a single shop to multiple locations. I've always had an instinct for finding opportunities, for scaling a business and turning profit. I understand the products, the customers, and the entire operation better than most. Her tone shifted, carrying quiet conviction. Honestly, I don't think you'll find anyone more capable. I said nothing, letting her words sink in, feeling the truth behind them. There was weight there, something more than just ambition. And Wyatt, she added softly, almost as if confessing a secret. I can't shake this feeling, like I'm meant to be here, like this is our second chance. She drew in a deep breath, steadying herself, before continuing. I know things fell apart before, everything with Silas, all that chaos, but we've survived it. We're still standing. And now, I can finally see it. A future for us. A life we can actually build together. I've never been this sure about anything. Her voice trembled, a plea hidden inside her resolve. There's more I can give, she added cryptically, leaving me puzzled. I raised a brow, silently urging her to continue. Financially, she said at last, a small, secretive smile flickering across her lips. I'll explain in time. I gave a slow nod, uncertain but listening. She leaned in then, voice dropping to almost a whisper. Wyatt, my feelings for you never went away. I'm still in love with you. The confession hung between us, heavy and raw. I've changed, she continued after a moment, her eyes searching mine. Truly changed. Silas taught me hard lessons, and I've grown from them. I want us to share in that growth now. I know. We'll take it slow. But you feel it too, don't you? That we're meant to find our way back to each other? Her gaze never wavered, so steady it was almost unnerving. And then the spell broke. An interruption. Angela appeared in the doorway, announcing an urgent call. I muttered a quick apology and stepped out. Damon's voice was on the other end of the line. I told him I'd be ready for him in an hour. When I returned to the office, I said evenly, Gemma, we're nearly finished here, but I have to ask, what exactly did you mean about financial backing? That's when she began her story, unraveling a past I hadn't expected to hear. She took me back to Ecuador, the day Silas died. She had been at the market gathering food, she explained, when chaos erupted at the house. Screams, shouting, panic. Terrified, she ran to the bedroom and hid in the closet, huddled in the dark as the violence unfolded. Then came the gunfire, sharp and echoing through the walls. And in that closet, behind a stack of boxes, she had found it, a canvas bag, heavy and packed with cash. Silas, she revealed, had insisted on keeping his dealings off the books, funneling cash from Cayman Island accounts. Inside that bag was more than $500,000. Even in the middle of the chaos, the terror, I knew I had to take it, Gemma admitted, voice low but firm. I earned that money, and now it could launch the new store. I see, I murmured carefully. That's something we can revisit later. For now, let me show you around. Her face lit up instantly, almost giddy, and she followed eagerly as I led her across the property. I moved deliberately, every step measured, buying Damon the hour he needed. At one point, Gemma slipped her hand into mine, as though no time at all had passed between us. I didn't pull away. Not yet. Optics mattered. Eventually, we looped back toward the office. In the parking lot, a sleek black sedan had just rolled in, its polished surface glinting in the sun. Inside the office, we sat across from each other, silence stretching while I weighed her words, her history, and the decision I had already made. Gemma, I began finally, my tone calm but firm. I've been meeting candidates all day. I wasn't sure who would be the right fit. Until now, I've reached my decision. Her face brightened instantly. That's wonderful, she exclaimed, anticipation lighting her features. I drew in a slow, steady breath. The new retail store manager will be Christy Freres. She interviewed first thing this morning. The words struck like a physical blow. What? She stammered, disbelief flooding her face. I don't understand. Did you even hear me? I belong here. This is where I'm supposed to be. Her voice rose, sharp with anger. Is this a joke? She demanded. No, I replied evenly. It isn't. Her expression hardened, fury simmering beneath the shock. After a long beat, she managed, Then give me something. Anything. Why? Leaning back in my chair, I held her glare and spoke evenly. There's a principle I live by, I said. A community survives on harmony. When one person threatens that harmony, changes must be made. Recognition flickered in her eyes. She knew the quote. Now, if you'll excuse me, I added, standing, I have other matters to attend to. But there's someone here who needs a word with you. Right on cue, Damon Claiborne stepped into the room, flanked by a county marshal. Gemma Weller, Damon said firmly. I'm Damon Claiborne, IRS. We need to talk about missing assets. Please come with us. As they moved toward the door, I called out, Damon! He glanced back. I tossed him the recording device. He caught it, gave a brief nod, and led a tearful Gemma out. For a fleeting moment, regret pricked at me. I almost faltered. Almost. But then the clarity returned. No, I had made the right call. And in that instant, I realized I had never been more certain of anything in my life.